Welcome back, my fellow gaming enthusiasts, MERP fans, and players of all things Lord of the Rings. This is the Fat Man GM's continuing review of this particular source book called Shadow of the South. And as I said, the first part of it, there's so much going on here that it really needed to be. I didn't want to. I couldn't do it justice by just doing the whole thing in 20 minutes, even with my rambling style of whatever. So we'll go back to this section on chapter 7, politics and power. Now, as I've mentioned before, it's kind of like Game of Thrones set in Middle Earth. This particular region is very thick with politics and opportunities. Of all the source books in all the regions in Middle Earth, this one here is the best one towards mimicking things like Faerun in Lord of the Dungeons and Dragons. So there is so much to do here, so many opportunities, so many ways to justify the various PC backgrounds and player characters and makeup that I found it quite enjoyable to play through just this one source book. I've used it, like I said, at least on 2 separate campaigns and quite successful ones, I thought. Players seem to enjoy them anyway. The section on the Council of Seven, Shadow in the South, uh, you know, says here the Council of Seven, the Velocity consists of 7 powerful lords, each who claim one of the 7 lands. From their dominion citadels, these oligarchs wield their power over all of southwestern Endor. To maintain the ancient Numerian legacy, constantly battle surrounds the city of Shadow, despite resistance from many of their subject peoples. Now, that's something to know. We talk about the internal politics here. While technically speaking, the whole region is under the influence of Sauron, and they do lip service to that to some degree. Within it, there's quite a few of these individual kingdoms that don't follow him blindly. They do their own thing, and they fight for that right. So while they won't work, they won't necessarily side with Gondor. They don't necessarily turn down small assistance and with Gondor in later years. In the current timeline and stuff, in the past, it would have been with Nurmur. So they are very fiercely independent and yet at the same time under the influence and growing slow. Then, of course, they have this slew of organizations and cults and religion. And religion in Middle Earth is different from what you find in your typical Dungeons and Dragons style game. And I can't speak of other game systems, but I can think of a handful off the top of my head that mimic more of the D&D style than Middle Earth. J.R.R. Tolkien has his own distinct take on religion, and I don't have enough verbiage knowledge to give you the proper terminology for how it would play out, but depending on where you're located. In Western Middle Earth, it's traditionally similar to what the elves. It's not a religion as in a blind deity thing, but following the tenets of the Valor and the creators. And U or Uru, however it's pronounced, the originator of the song, and that the high Numerians and stuff understood that these are actually higher beings, i.e., angels and their servants and stuff, but they don't venerate them like a blind religion or a traditional religion. So you don't have these huge churches and temples set up to Manwë, and you don't have followers of Manwë protesting in the streets ready to spill blood because they believe that he's all that in a bag of chips. But now you go into the East politics and religion get to be a lot more like your standard politics and religion, in part because majority of them are either based off of the older cultures, less divine knowledge of the Valor, and to them these are actual gods and goddesses to be feared and worshipped. And then, of course, the influences of Sauron, which in and of himself is also considered a god because he's one of those fallen angels or those servants of the Valor, so on and so forth. And that's that in a nutshell. So then we have the see groups, independent factions, the servants of the real fire. Now that's a religion. The monks of Urgrin, and this is one of the few times in Middle Earth you actually hear the mention of monks in general, which opened the door for the allowing of the player character class, the monk, in MERP much easier. So while they don't really have, or they didn't in the core book that I am off the top of my head, have an actual class based on monks, I had a tendency to simplify the rules by just supplementing Dungeons and Dragons and laying it over top of this world. It was just simpler. So when a player come up and said, I want to play a monk, well, one of my first things was, well, you could be a monk of this particular group. But it would also set the premise that there are other monk uh, I say I don't want to call it a religion, but you know what I'm saying, other groups of monks out there, so on and so forth. So we got the monks of Urgrin, the monks of Mortaran, rovers, divine speakers, warders of the night, desert screamers, masters of the golden eye, the Society of Deri. Then we got people of note, the Vladimir lords, great NPC section on NPCs and stuff. And as I say in almost all of these things, these are ready-made characters that you can utilize in any game you play, just a little bit of tweaking. Even if you use mechanics from a different game set, the backstory translates real easy, and it saves you a lot of effort and time of fluffing out your world if you don't have to write everything verbatim from scratch, make it up on the fly. If you can and you do, hey, good for you. Awesome. I'm glad you have such an abundance of free time that you can do that. There were times in my life when I did, and there's times when I didn't. So I took advantage of having bookcases full of stuff, and took advantage of using that stuff liberally as needed somewhere else. Okay. Chapter 9, Town Life and Trade, the cities. Romolo, Astor. We got ourselves a nice little color map of one of them. These are fairly good-sized cities of note. See, like as an example, Ostiller is situated on the western bank of the Selin, where the river empties into the southern part of the Bay of Drell. Founded in the Second Age 2222 by Camar, one of Tar Akkalimian's captains. It was erected on a granite rock surrounded by water and hills and leveled by numerine engineers. No Dunedain haven in the Dominion, save Molo, is as well protected. So, you're basically an enclave of Dunedain. The Asparel, other towns of note, quite a few of the small ones, which we like, and even better, I like these even more. Get color maps to go with them, the primary ones, and like I said, I've taken advantage of these things, having these maps over the years. We got commerce, chain of trade, roads, sites of note, Afers Manor. Nice little diagram of the manor here. Filled it in. Vari's maze. Yeah, I've used this maze a couple times just for simplicity fact. I got our regional color map of the area, typical of ice in their style. Hollow Morcaw, Urgost, once again, blueprints for buildings and towers, layouts, nice little things. The Hall of Makara. This floor is the dome rooms covered by a mosaic, which is divided into 12 areas, 6 blue, 6 gold. Each area corresponds to the sign associated with one of the order's 12 senior servants. The 6 of the blue flame, the 6 of the golden flame, the 160-foot high black ceilings adorned with a mosaic of the year's end sky. Quite descriptive. Good Glad, Marith Segal. You love listening to me butcher names. Various tunnels, the lair of the rain drake, shadow holes, house of the black hand. Good, very nice stuff. Good stuff. Black stairs, Argot's Tome, Mendo Mazzari. Some better than others. Not bad, still traditional. Good stuff. Tower of Hargrog. Tower of Hargrog sits high in the bamboo forest on the eastern side of the Yellow Mountains. No roads cut through the dense woods, only a narrow trail guarded by Hargrog's deadly slayers. It is an ideal site for half-troll servants since the assassins ride fell beasts. Yeah. Okay. that brings me up to a couple little neat things here, and then we will conclude it, right? Okay. There's such a variety of options and opportunities in this particular book in Shadows of the South that the sheer volume of play available in this one source book is well extensive. There's this fellow who's a vampire. He's a vampire lord in the service of Sauron. He rules a small kingdom and has an undead army at his beck and call, and is a threat to everybody in the region, and has his own agenda, right? And so you could be dealing with this guy or dealing with the fallout from this guy's actions. Then there's this other fellow who's a half troll, half, I'm not sure if it was human or elf, but he's half troll, and he's smarter than the average troll. Not quite as big and powerful, but he's still one mean brute. And he also has his own little enclave and his own rule. And this feller is nobody to mess with. At the same time, his followers do quite a lot of damage, both in the name of Sauron and just for the hell of it, just for the sheer chaos of it. And then you have, like I said, the numerous different human factions going on here. So there's so much going on in such a small area that the opportunities for gameplay are vast. And what I like the best about them is that they're interconnectable, easily interconnectable. So if in one of my campaigns, I think the first campaign, we had a group of player characters who represented I don't want to call them royal retainers, but because they weren't, they were this hodgepodge of specialists, if you will, that were handpicked by the royal chamberlain of this local petty lord, and their job was to go out and fix a few problems for the would-be king, and in the process became embroiled in a number of conflicts and engagements against various political bodies, not just the enemies of the king, so to speak, but elements within the kingdom who were supposed to be allies to the king also had their own agendas, and these people were fixers, if you will, to a certain degree. And the guys that play in the game, they really got into it. They really enjoyed the wheels inside of wheels stuff. And they had a base of operations. They weren't mercenaries. They weren't your murder hobos, as you guys like to call them nowadays, rolling bloodthirst mercenaries. These guys were paid retainers or paid agents of a kingdom, and so they had a base of operations. They had a steady supply of resources. They had additional resources they could tap into with care. I mean, they didn't carry a badge around that they could flash to everybody saying, in the name of the king, I need your help, blah, blah, but they were able to gain quite a bit of influence. And in turn, eventually became crucial or key critical components to the success of this small kingdom up and over against its rivals, including the Storm King, which they repeatedly had problems with for obvious reasons. Sauron wants to control the region just like everybody else, and they kept, for their brief stint in the sun, kept that from happening. So I think that campaign lasted 6-7 months. I'm not sure the exact length of it, but it was pretty good. I liked it. So there you have it. One of the better source books, one of the more convoluted ones, with lots of sub material in it that's useful. Very good books. If you can get your hands on one of these things, it's worth having. Even if you can just borrow one from somebody you know, so you can just read it. If you're an enthusiast of Lord of the Rings, these books, for the read material alone, give you a great wealth of expanded knowledge of the game world, of the world that we love as Lord of the Rings. Granted, most of it is created fantasy based off of the creators of Iron Crown and the writers and designers. It is what it is. But whenever I go back and I watch the movie, and especially when I read the novels, I go back every year, once a year, and I read the novels. And I read them each year from a slightly newer perspective or different perspective. And all this material that I've seen and read influences that. So when I hear a reference, even as vague as it sounds, it's not so vague to me anymore because I can visualize it in my head. And I can't speak for other people, but for me, that's what reading is. Reading is a movie in my head. I actually envision in color. I can hear the people, the voices. I can see the action going on as I read. I get so engrossed in the material that to me, I'm watching it unfold in front of me and not just struggling with the words like some folks. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking you for if you have that issue. God, keep reading. That's the main thing. I've been reading since I was 6 years old, and I started reading very thick adult literature books, old school English books from the 50s, 60s. My grandma used to buy them for me, and old fantasy novels and science fiction stuff that you just not the sort of material that a preteen usually is reading. My friends were reading Dr. Seuss. I was reading the original Swiss Family Robinson, which was a bloody book this thick. So I'm just saying. And there you have it. On to the next one. Enjoy your day.